Burning alive leaves a scent in your memory that never truly fades. For 3 agonizing years, I existed as a scarred monster, abandoned by the man I walked through hellfire to save. Suddenly, the universe blinked, rewinding time 30 minutes before the fatal inferno. This time, I kept walking. They say when you die, your life flashes before your eyes. For me, it wasn't my whole life, just the agonizing 3 years after the fire. In my first life, on the freezing night of December 14th, the faulty wiring in our vintage Chicago apartment sparked a massive blaze. My boyfriend, Liam Hayes, was dead asleep in the master bedroom, dead drunk after a stressful networking event. I was in the kitchen. When the smoke alarm shrieked, I didn't run for the front door. I ran straight into the heart of the inferno. I remember the ceiling beam collapsing. I remember throwing my body over his unconscious form, shielding his face and chest, while the burning drywall rained down on my back. I dragged his dead weight out into the hallway, screaming until my vocal cords blistered. Liam walked away with a singed eyebrow and a mild case of smoke inhalation. I suffered 3rd-degree burns over 70% of my body. I spent 6 months in a medically induced coma at Northwestern Memorial's burn unit. When I finally woke up, wrapped in gauze like a grotesque mummy, Liam wasn't crying tears of gratitude by my bedside. He looked at me with thinly veiled disgust. Within a year, the visits stopped entirely. "It's just too much pressure, Chloe," he had whined, refusing to look at my scarred face. "I need to live my life, and you're anchoring me to this tragedy." He left me to drown in medical debt. 3 months later, I saw him on social media, tagged in a photo from Cabo. He was kissing my best friend, Jessica Stanton. The caption read, "Surviving the fire taught us that life is too short to hide our true feelings." They had been sleeping together for months before the fire ever happened. I had sacrificed my face, my skin, and my future for a man who was already planning to kick me to the curb. I died in a cheap, understaffed hospice facility on a Tuesday afternoon, my organs finally failing from a persistent infection. My last memory was the flickering screen of a dusty television, broadcasting Liam and Jessica's engagement announcement, and then I gasped. My lungs, which had been tight and rattling for years, filled with crisp, cool air. My eyes snapped open. I wasn't staring at the water-stained ceiling of the hospice. I was looking at the gleaming white marble of my kitchen island at the St. James apartment complex. I gripped the edge of the counter, my heart hammering against my ribs. I looked down at my hands. They were smooth, pale, and flawless. The severe, ropey keloid scars that had twisted my fingers into permanent claws were gone. I touched my face. Soft skin. No bandages. No pain. I grabbed my iPhone resting on the counter. The date glowed brightly on the lock screen. December 14th, 2023. 11:30 p.m. I had gone back. The universe, in some twisted, miraculous glitch, had rewound the tape. A heavy snore echoed from the bedroom down the hall. Liam. My blood ran cold, then boiled. The fire hadn't started yet. In my previous timeline, the blaze ignited at exactly 11:45 p.m. from a cheap, uncertified space heater. Liam insisted on running in the guest room for his exotic plants. I walked quietly down the hallway. Liam was sprawled across our king-sized bed, wearing only his boxers, reeking of expensive scotch and cheap perfume. Jessica's perfume. Chanel Mademoiselle. My stomach churned. The signs had always been there, but I had been too blindly in love to connect the dots. His phone sat on the nightstand, buzzing with a new text. In my past life, I respected his privacy. Tonight, I picked it up. The passcode was 0812, Jessica's birthday. The screen opened directly to his text thread with her. Jessica, 11:15 p.m. Did you tell her yet? I'm tired of sneaking around. That apartment is big enough for us. Liam, 11:10 p.m. Not tonight, babe. Too drunk. I'll break it off with Chloe after Christmas. Let her have one last holiday before I tell her to pack her bags. Miss you. Jessica, 11:20 p.m. You're too soft on her, Liam. Just kick her out. See you tomorrow. Love you. A cold, hollow laugh escaped my lips. Too soft on me. I had burned alive for this man. I had endured skin grafts, excruciating physical therapy, and the complete destruction of my identity for a man who viewed me as an inconvenient roommate. I checked the time. 11:38 p.m. The faint, unmistakable smell of melting plastic drifted from the guest room. In my first life, this was the moment I panicked, screaming his name, running to the fire extinguisher that turned out to be expired. This time, I didn't scream. I didn't panic. I felt a profound, chilling sense of calm settle over my mind. I walked into my office and pulled out my emergency go bag. I grabbed my passport, my social security card, the hard drive containing all my graphic design portfolios, and my grandmother's vintage Cartier watch. I zipped the bag shut. Next, I went to the living room, where my golden retriever, Barnaby, was dozing on his orthopedic bed. I clipped on his leash. Barnaby looked up at me, sensing the shift in my energy, his tail giving a low, confused thump. Come on, buddy, I whispered. We're going for a late-night walk. The smell of smoke was getting stronger. A thin grey wisp was beginning to slither out from under the guest room door. I stood at the front door of the apartment, holding Barnaby's leash. I looked back down the hallway toward the master bedroom. Liam snored loudly, oblivious to the toxic fumes beginning to gather near the ceiling. All I had to do was yell his name. All I had to do was throw a glass against the wall to wake him up. I'll break it off with Chloe after Christmas. Just kick her out. I stepped out into the hallway and pulled the heavy oak door shut behind me. I heard the lock click into place. Enjoy your new life, Liam. The winter air bit at my cheeks as I walked Barnaby down West 47th Avenue. I didn't run. I strolled casually, the crunch of the salted snow under my boots grounding me in this surreal new reality. We crossed the street to a 24-hour spot called O'Malley's Diner. I tied Barnaby to the heated patio railing, walked inside, and ordered a black coffee to go. I stood by the diner's large front window, sipping the bitter brew, my eyes locked on the St. James apartment building, directly across the street. The digital clock on the diner wall flipped to 11:50 p.m. Suddenly, a loud pop echoed through the quiet street, followed by the shattering of glass. Flames erupted from the third-floor window, my guest room window. The fire licked aggressively up brick facade, a beautiful, terrifying beast of orange and red. Thick, black smoke billowed into the night sky. Panic erupted on the street. Pedestrians began shouting, and someone inside the diner yelled, "Call 911! The St. James is on fire!" I waited exactly 3 minutes. I needed to ensure the blaze was uncontrollable. Then I dropped my coffee cup, forcing a look of absolute, hysterical terror onto my face. I rushed out of the diner, dragging Barnaby behind me, and sprinted toward the building. "Liam!" I screamed, my voice cracking perfectly. "My boyfriend! He's inside! Help! Somebody help him!" Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder until 2 fire engines and an ambulance screeched to a halt in front of the building. Firefighters in heavy turnout gear poured out, unwinding hoses and barking orders. The building's fire alarm was finally blaring, a piercing, rhythmic screech. Other residents were pouring out of the front doors in their pajamas, coughing and clutching their pets. I grabbed the arm of a passing police officer. "My apartment, 3B. My boyfriend is asleep in there. Please, you have to save him," I sobbed, sinking to my knees in the snow, playing the role of the desperate, helpless girlfriend to perfection. "We've got men going in now, ma'am. Stay back," the officer shouted over the chaos. I stayed back. I watched the windows of my apartment shatter one by one as the fire aggressively consumed the living room. It was taking much longer than it had in my past life. Without my immediate intervention, without me dragging him toward the door, Liam was entirely at the mercy of the rescue team. 20 agonizing minutes passed. Finally, 2 firefighters emerged through the front lobby doors, dragging a stretcher. I pushed through the crowd, my heart skipping a beat. Was he dead? Had I pushed the timeline too far? I looked down at the stretcher. It was Liam, but he was unrecognizable. His clothes were melted to his skin. His face, hands, and chest were charred and blackened, covered in angry, blistering red flesh. He was unconscious, a breathing tube already being shoved down his throat by paramedics. He wasn't dead, but he was exactly where I had been 3 years ago. The universe demands balance, after all. "Are you family?" a paramedic yelled at me. "I'm his girlfriend," I cried, burying my face in my hands to hide the complete lack of tears. "Is he going to live?" "He's in critical condition, severe 3rd-degree burns. We're transporting him to the St. Jude's Burn Center immediately." I followed them to the hospital in a police cruiser, Barnaby safely tucked into the back seat with me. Detective Gregory Mitchell, a stern-looking man in a rumpled trench coat, sat in the passenger seat, taking notes. "Ms. Reynolds, can you tell me exactly where you were when the fire started?" Detective Mitchell asked gently. "I couldn't sleep," I lied smoothly, my voice trembling. "Barnaby was restless, so I took him for a late-night walk to O'Malley's across the street. I was just getting a coffee when I saw the window blow out. I tried to run back in, but the smoke. It was too thick. Liam had this terrible singing heater in the guest room. I told him 100 times it was a fire hazard, but he wouldn't listen." Mitchell nodded sympathetically. "Don't blame yourself, Ms. Reynolds. Old buildings, space heaters. It's a tragic combination. You're lucky you were out with the dog." "Yes," I whispered, looking out the window at the passing street lights. "It's very lucky." The waiting room at St. Jude's Burn Center was a miserable, sterile purgatory. I sat in a plastic chair, nursing a cup of water, waiting for the inevitable arrival. At 2:15 a.m., the sliding emergency doors burst open. Jessica Stanton ran in. She was fully dressed in a designer coat, her makeup perfect, though she was doing her best to look frantic. She immediately spotted me and rushed over, grabbing my shoulders. "Chloe, oh my God, I came as soon as I saw the news on Twitter. Where is he? Is Liam okay?" Her voice was breathless, panicked. In my past life, she hadn't shown up to the hospital until a week later, and only to comfort Liam about my condition. I looked up at her, letting a single dramatic tear roll down my cheek. "It's bad, Jess. It's really bad." Before she could press further, the heavy double doors of the ICU swung open. Dr. Arthur Caldwell, the head of the burn unit, the exact same doctor who had treated me in my first life, walked toward us, looking grim. "Family of Liam Hayes?" Dr. Caldwell asked. "I'm his girlfriend," I said, standing up. Jessica hovered right behind me, literally stepping on my heels. Dr. Caldwell sighed. "Liam is stable, but he has sustained extensive trauma. He has 3rd and 4th degree burns, covering roughly 65% of his body, primarily on his face, chest, and arms. He has severe smoke inhalation and respiratory burns. We currently have him in a medically induced coma to manage the pain and begin the skin grafting process." Jessica's perfectly manicured hands flew to her mouth. His face? Is it ruined?" Dr. Caldwell frowned at her bluntness. "He will require multiple reconstructive surgeries over the next several years. His life will never be the same. He will need round-the-clock care and support." I watched Jessica's expression carefully. The horror, the immediate calculation, the profound disgust settling into her eyes. It was like watching a mirror reflection of Liam's reaction to me in the past life. "Can we see him?" I asked softly. "Briefly," Dr. Caldwell warned. "Prepare yourselves." We followed the doctor into the ICU. Liam was hooked up to a dozen machines, wrapped tightly in sterile white gauze, his head swollen to twice its normal size. The smell of iodine and burnt flesh hung heavily in the air. Jessica took one step into the room, gagged loudly, and stumbled backward. I can't look at this," she choked out, turning and practically sprinting out of the ICU. I walked slowly to Liam's bedside. I looked down at the man who had abandoned me to die alone. The monitor beeped a steady, rhythmic validation of my choices. I leaned down, placing my lips right next to the small gap in the bandages by his ear. I knew from my own time in a coma that sometimes the patients can hear you. "Don't worry, Liam," I whispered into his ear. "I'll make sure Jessica visits you. After all, you two deserve each other." The first 4 weeks of Liam's medically induced coma were an absolute masterclass in public relations and calculated deception. I played the role of the devoted, profoundly traumatized girlfriend with award-winning precision. Every single morning, I walked through the sliding glass doors of St. Jude's Burn Center, holding a lukewarm cup of black coffee, my hair deliberately messy, wearing oversized sweaters that made me look fragile and small. I sat by his bedside for hours, holding his unburned left hand, whispering sweet nothings into his ear whenever the nurses were hovering nearby. Detective Gregory Mitchell officially closed the investigation during the 2nd week, ruling the fire a tragic accident caused by a faulty, unregulated space heater. Liam was legally at fault, which meant the building's insurance company was preparing a massive negligence lawsuit against him. I shed perfectly timed tears in the detective's office, clutching Barnaby's leash, lamenting how I had warned Liam 1,000 times about that dangerous heater. Meanwhile, Jessica Stanton was doing everything in her power to distance herself from the gruesome reality of her secret lover's new existence. She stopped answering my texts, claiming she was overwhelmed with her marketing job and simply could not handle the emotional toll of the hospital environment. But I was not about to let her slip away into the shadows. I aggressively tagged her in every single social media post I made about Liam's tragic condition. I posted endless heartbreaking updates on Facebook and Instagram, publicly thanking my absolute best friend, Jessica, for her unwavering emotional support during this devastating chapter of our lives. I effectively trapped her in the blinding spotlight of public scrutiny. Her co-workers, our mutual friends, and even her own family members began praising her loyalty, forcing her to occasionally show up at the hospital with forced smiles and cheap bouquets of grocery store flowers just to maintain her pristine social image. The true nightmare for Liam began on a bleak, snowy Tuesday morning, when Dr. Arthur Caldwell finally began the process of weaning him off the heavy sedatives. I was sitting right there in the sterile, brightly lit intensive care unit when Liam's swollen, bloodshot eyes fluttered open for the very first time. Panic instantly seized his monitors. His heart rate skyrocketed, the machines shrieking in alarm as he realized he was trapped in a mummified prison of thick white gauze and agonizing pain. He tried to speak, to scream, but the heavy plastic intubation tube shoved down his throat silenced him. I leaned over the metal bed railing, my face mere inches from his remaining ear, and stroked his hair with a gentle, sickeningly sweet touch. I looked deep into his terrified, darting eyes and whispered, "You are safe now, baby. You survived the fire. I am right here, and I am never, ever going to leave you." The sheer, absolute horror that washed over his remaining visible features was the most satisfying thing I had ever witnessed in my entire life. 2 days later, Liam's boss, Richard Henderson, the ruthless CEO of the tech startup where Liam worked as a senior developer, paid a highly anticipated visit to the burn unit. Richard stood awkwardly at the foot of the hospital bed, holding his expensive wool fedora, refusing to look directly at Liam's ruined, heavily bandaged face. Richard cleared his throat nervously and delivered the crushing blow. Due to the catastrophic nature of Liam's injuries, the incredibly long projected recovery time, and the negative public relations nightmare of the negligence lawsuit regarding the apartment fire, the company was officially terminating his employment. Richard handed me a manila envelope containing Liam's final meager severance check and the devastating notification that his premium corporate health insurance would expire at the end of the current month. I watched Liam's chest heave with silent, agonizing sobs beneath the heavy white blankets as Richard swiftly turned on his heel and practically sprinted out of the hospital room. The financial ruin was absolute and terrifyingly swift. Because we were not legally married, my personal finances, my savings accounts, and my lucrative graphic design business were entirely protected from his mounting debts. I hired a ruthless local attorney named Bradley Jenkins to legally sever my name from our shared apartment lease, citing severe emotional distress and trauma. I quietly moved all of my belongings into a beautiful sunlit loft on the opposite side of Chicago, paying 6 months of rent up front in cash. Liam, however, was drowning in hundreds of thousands of dollars of uncovered medical bills, relentless calls from aggressive debt collectors, and the impending lawsuit from the St. James apartment management. When Dr. Caldwell explained that Liam would need at least 5 more highly specialized reconstructive surgeries on his face and chest, Liam just stared blankly at the hospital ceiling, completely dead inside. I finally cornered Jessica in the hospital cafeteria on a rainy Thursday afternoon. She was sipping a diet soda, looking impeccably dressed in a tailored navy pantsuit, nervously checking her expensive gold wristwatch. I sat down directly across from her, sliding a massive stack of terrifying medical bills and legal documents across the sticky laminate table. I looked her dead in the eyes and delivered my finest performance yet. "Jess, I simply cannot do this alone anymore," I sobbed loudly, ensuring the nurses at the next table could hear my desperate pleas. "Liam needs round-the-clock care when he gets discharged next week. He needs his bandages changed twice a day. He needs help bathing. And he needs someone to feed him through a tube. My graphic design business is failing because I am here every single day. As my best friend, and as the person Liam always admired so deeply, I need you to step up. I need you to move into his new ground-floor assisted living apartment and help me take care of him." The absolute visceral disgust and blinding panic that instantly washed over Jessica's perfectly contoured face was a priceless masterpiece of human misery. The day Liam was officially discharged from St. Jude's Burn Center was a bleak, miserable afternoon in early March. He was confined to a heavy, motorized wheelchair, his body hidden beneath layers of protective compression garments, his face partially concealed by a specialized silicone healing mask that made him look like a grotesque, melted mannequin. I did not bring him back to a luxurious, high-rise apartment. Instead, using his severely depleted remaining funds, I had rented him a cramped, depressing, ground-floor unit in a dilapidated building on the rougher south side of the city. The apartment constantly smelled of cheap bleach, stale cigarettes, and boiled cabbage. I wheeled him into the tiny, dimly lit living room, parked him in front of a scratched television set, and locked the deadbolt behind us. He looked around the dismal, depressing room, his exposed eye filling with fresh, miserable tears. This was his new permanent reality. I had carefully orchestrated the grand finale for exactly 6 o'clock that evening. I had repeatedly texted Jessica from Liam's own recovered cell phone, begging her to come to the new apartment, claiming it was an absolute emergency, and that he desperately needed to see her face to find the strength to keep living. She arrived at exactly 6:15, wearing an excessive amount of her signature Chanel Mademoiselle perfume, looking deeply uncomfortable as she navigated the filthy hallway of the cheap apartment building. I opened the door and ushered her inside the cramped living room where Liam was sitting silently in his motorized wheelchair. The moment Jessica actually saw him in the harsh, unforgiving, fluorescent lighting of the cheap apartment, completely stripped of the sterile hospital environment, her facade completely crumbled. She literally took 3 massive steps backward, her hand flying up to cover her mouth as she gagged visibly. "Jessica," Liam managed to croak out, his vocal cords still severely damaged and raspy from the heavy smoke inhalation. "You came. I needed you so badly." He weakly reached out a heavily scarred, trembling hand toward her. "Don't touch me!" Jessica shrieked hysterically, completely losing her mind, slapping his hand away with brutal, unhinged force. "Look at you! You are a monster! You are completely disgusting! I cannot do this, Liam. I am a young, beautiful woman with a career and a future. I am not spending the rest of my life wiping the drool off the chin of a burned, broke, pathetic cripple. We are completely done. Do you hear me? We are done." Liam recoiled as if he had been shot directly in the chest, a horrible, gut-wrenching wail of pure agony escaping his ruined throat. That was my cue. I stepped slowly out from the shadows of the tiny kitchenette, holding a thick manila folder in my left hand. I walked calmly over to the cheap coffee table and tossed the folder down. It landed with a heavy, satisfying thud. Hundreds of printed pages spilled out across the scratched wood. Every single text message, every explicit photograph, every secret hotel receipt from their disgusting 10-month affair. I had paid a private investigator to compile the entire miserable history of their betrayal while Liam was asleep in his medically induced coma. Both of them froze completely, staring at the glossy photographs and highlighted text messages scattered across the table. "Did you honestly think I didn't know?" I asked, my voice terrifyingly calm, devoid of any warmth or sympathy. "Did you really think I was just some clueless, pathetic idiot who would happily burn alive to save a man who was already planning to throw me out on the street right after Christmas?" Liam's one good eye widened in absolute, paralyzing terror. He tried to speak, to formulate a pathetic excuse, but only a wet, choking sound escaped his ruined lips. Jessica was trembling violently, her expensive designer purse dropping from her manicured hands onto the stained carpet. "The night of the fire, Liam," I whispered, leaning down so my face was perfectly level with his silicone healing mask. I wasn't asleep in the kitchen. I didn't wake up late. I stood right outside that guest room door. I smelled the melting plastic. I saw the thick black smoke rolling under the wood. And I just stood there. I stood there, holding my dog's leash, and I listened to you snore. I walked out the front door, locked it tightly behind me, and I went across the street to buy a cup of coffee while you roasted in your own bed. Liam began to hyperventilate violently, his chest heaving under his compression garments, his heart monitor on his wrist beginning to beep frantically. "You did this to him!" Jessica screamed, stepping toward me with wild, terrified eyes. "You're a total psychopath! I'm calling the police!" "Call them," I challenged her, smiling a cold, dead smile that reached all the way to my eyes. "Tell them exactly what I did. Tell Detective Mitchell that I went for a walk. Because legally, Jessica, I did absolutely nothing wrong. There is no law that states I must risk my own life to drag a cheating, worthless drunk out of a fire he started himself. You, on the other hand, just publicly abandoned a severely disabled man after secretly sleeping with him for a year. Have fun explaining that to all of our mutual friends on Facebook." I turned my back on both of them, grabbing Barnaby's leather leash from the hook by the door. The dog trotted happily to my side, completely unbothered by the heavy tension in the room. I opened the front door, letting the crisp, fresh spring air flood into the suffocating, foul-smelling apartment. I stepped out into the hallway, leaving the door wide open, leaving them trapped in the miserable, inescapable hell they had built for themselves. I never looked back. If you felt the heat of this revenge story and loved watching karma serve a dish colder than ice, hit that like button right now. Don't forget to share this video with friends who need a reminder that betrayal always comes with a heavy price. Subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so you never miss another thrilling, true-to-life drama. Drop a comment below and tell us, would you have left Liam in the fire? See you in the next story.